Okay, for this Dharma talk, well, first of all, I want to welcome you to this particular hall, Wisdom Hall. It's a wonderful space to be in. It's bright, it's cheerful, and I think it's easy in our practice to take ourselves really seriously. And this atmosphere helps us to just lighten up, brighten up, feel good inside. The outside kind of reflects what's going on inside sometimes. I'm indebted to Grace Shearson for this particular talk. It's inspired by a writing of hers that I found in this book that I recently purchased. I was at a conference of Soto Zen priests in Zen Mountain Monastery, which is in New York, in the Catskills, and this book was being sold there. It's a compilation of women teachers that are kind of our elders, and I couldn't not buy it because my teacher wrote the introduction to the book. I have to get it now, and it's a fantastic. Every article I've read so far in this book is fantastic. It's called Zen Teachings in Challenging Times. The image on the cover of the book is one of the Bodhisattva of compassion, and you see her hand. So she's in this statue. The hand is coming down to offer assistance, offer guidance, offer help. I'll never forget my teacher saying that when you are in need of help, when you're in need of a hand, you don't care whether the hand is male or female. If somebody offers you a hand and you're stuck, then you take whoever's hand is there. And that's what I think of when I see this image of Avalokiteshvara, or the Bodhisattva of compassion. Well, my teacher is female, and it's kind of an odd thing from a Japanese Buddhist perspective for a male to work under the guidance of a female. And so that helped me out to kind of make that bridge. Doesn't matter, male or female. And this is America anyways. So the writing that I want to talk about here is by a teacher, a colleague of mine named Grace Shearson, and she has a therapy background, and she looks at practice in terms of the stages of development from youth through adulthood to old age. And she talks about what's called these 8 winds. There's 8 winds, and these winds, in a sense, blow us. They blow us over. They knock us down. And they get us ungrounded. It's a feeling of not being really present. These 8 winds have a lot of power, and all 8 of them blow through our life. And sometimes some are more present than others. And she sees that these 8 winds blow also in different stages. So there's 4 stages that she names. The first one is the stage of the baby. So there's a wind. There's a particular set of winds, 2 winds that blow there. Pleasure and pain. That's what a baby knows. That's what they feel. They feel either pleasure or pain, and they're not able to discern, like making decisions is not at that stage. And pleasure and pain is something we can all identify with, whether we're an infant or not. We feel pleasure, we like pleasure, we move towards it, and we try our best to avoid pain. Then the second stage is as a child, you grow out of that. And it also moves into older children, adolescents, and even into adulthood, and that is the winds of the pair of gain and loss. So at this stage, our thought develops. We develop ability to think and to strategize. And our strategy is, how do we maximize our pleasure and minimize our pain? So now this wind, this pleasure-pain wind is morphing into something a little bit more advanced. It's loss and gain, gain and loss. How do we get more pleasure? How do we decrease pain? So the baby stage is very simple. It's like the infant, when they're hungry, when they're wet, they cry. When they need some love, they cry. And they feel pleasure when they're being held, when they're getting their diaper dry, their dry diaper, food in their mouth, milk in their stomach. As we develop, we learn, like, for example, to maximize our pleasure, we may steal a cookie, take that cookie from the cookie jar, or to avoid the feeling of guilt, we might deny that we took the cookie. Let's say, I didn't take that cookie, because we don't want to feel that sense of loss. And as we grow into adulthood, gaining approval and status become more important. The gain becomes approval. We want to be approved by others. We want to gain in our status, in our social status. We want to climb up. Things like getting liked on social media is important. Awards. Remember when I was on the swim team, getting a ribbon was really super important. Like, you came in third place, even if I came in sixth place, I wanted that ribbon. I didn't care what color it was. I wanted that ribbon. Degrees, we go through college or high school, whatever it is. We need that degree. And as we continue to develop, those winds morph again to praise and blame. So those are the two pairs, and you can see, like, pleasure becomes gain, and gain grows into praise. We want praise. We seek it. We desire praise. We want to be liked, and we avoid at all costs sometimes blame. Nobody likes to be blamed for something that they did that was wrong, or to be accused wrongly of something that they didn't do. So this is how we seek pleasure, in the form of praise. And what this looks like is, in some cases, the job responsibilities that we hold, certain positions that we have. We may feel a sense of, we might get praise from our family, from our friends. Oh, you do that. That's your job. Great. That's great. Or it may look like our position in our church. It could simply be being a parent, or the way that we parent, or having a partner. These are all forms of praise and blame. Then the last stage, old age. This is the winds that come to the fore are fame and shame. Fame, meaning we look back, we begin to realize our mortality. We begin to realize, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be here forever. And we begin to look back at our life, and we wonder if we've achieved what we intended to achieve. We start to remember what our goals were and recount them, and whether or not there is something that we had attained, or maybe not. So we may feel shame, or we may feel a sense of fame, in the sense of, I'm going to be able to carry on this legacy, whatever it might be. So questions that might come up for us is, did I do enough in my life? Did I do enough? What were my mistakes? How will I be remembered? What are my regrets? So these are the four sets of winds. They kind of blow throughout our lifetime, and they can any one of those 8 winds can be blowing at any different time, and they can figuratively blow us away. They can make us feel like we're ungrounded, particularly the negative ones. When we don't have when we're being blamed, or when we feel shame, or when we feel loss, however that loss might appear. It could be the loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of a particular status. They can disorient us, and we feel off balance. And this kind of groundlessness that the winds open us up to is quite uncomfortable. Without practice, without some kind of a practice, call it spiritual, call it Buddhism, call it whatever you want to call it, some kind of a practice to guide us through this. Without that, we just simply seek more comfort, and it usually that seeking of comfort creates more conflict in our life. So, for example, if I'm a pleaser, which oftentimes I am, I like to please people. It's just kind of my own habit pattern. And if I don't recognize my own innate desire for everybody else to be happy, then I might try to continue to look for praise in others, or to avoid blame. And this kind of constant seeking of affirmation outside of ourselves, then it just creates more suffering. And so our practice here, actually there are then 8 different practices that we can consider with regards to these 8 winds. So if we can begin to notice the wind that's blowing our way, pleasure, pain, fame, gain, loss, shame, praise. If we can begin to notice these winds, it could be like the Buddha's finger on your heart's doorbell button, waking us up, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, these winds are blowing. Something doesn't feel quite right. I'm in a state of wanting something more than I have right now. I feel off balance. I feel groundless." So that groundless state is an opportunity to find freedom if we don't continue to seek after the kind of or seek for comfort. If we don't continue to try to seek for simply comfort, then this groundless state can actually bring a measure of freedom. So the 8 practices, or 8 responses to these 8 winds, I'll just read them off and then I'll go into each one. The first one is developing stability in meditation. The second one is realizing impermanence. The third one is seeing that more desires increase suffering. The fourth one, understanding that all humans have cravings. All humans have cravings. The fifth one, not looking outside ourselves for affirmation. The sixth one, finding time for secluded contemplation. The seventh one is making sincere effort. And the eighth one is cultivating wisdom, seeing the world as always on fire. So those are the 8 responses to these 8 winds. So I'll go through each one of them. So stability in meditation. Stability in meditation. That's basically what we're doing right now. We're sitting here and we're learning ways to regulate our mental and emotional state. We can't expect children to be able to do this. That's not the idea here. But we can regulate ourselves when our children are dysregulated. So when our children are, and actually it doesn't matter the age, but it can be helpful, especially when they're young. We are the external regulatory system for our children. They'll learn how to self-regulate themselves based on how we respond to their anxiety, to their anger, to their shame, whatever it is to their pleasure and pain. So the way that we respond will affect how they learn how to respond or internalize. We start out as parents, we start out as the external regulatory system for our children, and as they grow up, they internalize however it is we were for them. So we have this opportunity then with children, if we have children, but it doesn't matter, even if it's with adults, and it doesn't have to be those that are related to us even. But we have this opportunity to be the external regulatory system of those around us. And that comes through finding some degree of stability when we're meditating. So learning how to meditate. The second one is realizing impermanence. So realizing that things change. We notice that pain and pleasure come and go. Pain and pleasure are not permanent. One thing we can probably all relate to here is the change that comes from a shift or the change that comes from having moved from one location to another, from one address to another. Is there anybody here who has never moved before? Yeah. Some people don't. I mean, I think this is probably a more recent thing that many people don't stay in the same place for very long. But I think if we go back, not that far, maybe 100 years, many people, a lot of people would maybe even had died in the same house they were born in, or at least lived in the same neighborhood that they were born in. There wasn't nearly as much movement, just because, well, there was still movement. I don't want to say that there wasn't movement. There's people traveled long distances by foot. So people did move, but the chances of movement, of actually staying in the same town that you grew up in, was probably much higher until recently. But now with the kinds of transportation that we have, we can move from one side of the globe to the other in practically a heartbeat. And so if you just consider, maybe just take a few seconds here to consider all of the changes that you've witnessed in your lifetime, the changes of address, and to kind of feel that for a second, It's like, wow, look at all that change. Where were you born? Are you there now? What about all the places? When you think about it, where were you born? And how far away are you from your birthplace? Now, it's very natural to want to go back to your birthplace from a salmon perspective. The fish, they go back. They know where they were born. They don't need a map. They have an internal guide there. But where's our home as humans? Where's our home? The underlying this ability to see impermanence is a sense of what I've been kind of trying to get at here of, as we're sitting, of unconditional love of ourself, or as what Tara Brach calls radical acceptance. Now, if we start with that as our foundation ground, as radical acceptance of ourselves, as however we are, then we can also accept impermanence, or we can develop the ability to stay with the impermanence of things. Because if we accept all of the various feelings that we have, the shame, the blame, pain, and if we can see those as all of it as being okay, then some shift takes place where we also begin to notice that these things don't stay. They also shift. And it's okay to watch them shift, to notice them change. The third one is more desires increase suffering. More desires increase suffering. So that's a kind of one of the kernel teachings of the Buddha, that desire equals suffering. The more that we desire, the more that we suffer. But we can question that, and I encourage us to also question that. But my teacher, I remember when, being a college student and meeting my teacher for the first time, and I was really, at that time, I was 19 or 20, and in college there's this huge push to be somebody and to get somewhere, to get a name, to have that fame. And I remember sitting there with her, and she was saying to me that she knows wealth. She married a very wealthy businessman, and she realized after 6 years and finally ending that marriage that wealth does not equal happiness. And she knew great poverty too. As a Zen nun, she gave away almost all that she owned, and this was in Japan. And she lived with very, very simply in the Zen temples, far simply than I ever experienced in my own training, to a certain, well, anyway. And so she said, you could have a really, like, was it a princess on many mattresses? What's that story?
Princess and the Pea.
Princess and the Pea, yeah, and sleep horribly on the best of beds, or you could sleep well in a ditch. And here I was 19, listening to her, thinking, what? Did she just say that? Wow, I got to learn how to sleep in a ditch. But yeah. Does desire equal more suffering? Does the getting of our desire, the fulfillment of desire, create more suffering or not? So this is a question. We can notice how desire feels in our body, and as a practice. How does it feel? Where do we feel it? And where do we feel when desire comes up? I might feel it in my abdomen, my core. Might feel that like sensation there, maybe a strong sensation in my core. My heart gets faster. My chest contracts a little bit. It depends on the context, of course. So this is like noticing it. I've been taking up, in college I was a swimmer. I swam through college. And now I've started swimming again. I've had this kind of love-hate relationship with this sport because in some sense I hate competition, in another sense I love it. And I feel that pull, But now that I'm not no longer competing for any reason. I just get in and swim. I still have that habit energy of wanting to go faster. And I notice that when I swim now. And so I'm noticing like, oh, my heart, my chest is clenched. I'm not able to breathe as well because I'm trying to get faster. And so my practice now in the water is to let go of that habit energy that was cultivated from 7 to 21. And it's no longer useful anymore. Can I just go in and swim and enjoy moving through the water without trying to beat anybody to nowhere? So it's been an interesting thing, like undoing and undoing. Does desire go away when we attain the object of the desire? Or does it return? Does the desire itself feel good or bad? Now, these are questions we can consider with desire. By becoming curious, by investigating desire in this way, we can determine whether our specific desires are wholesome or unwholesome. So there are wholesome desires too. The desire for world peace is a wholesome desire, but then we don't have to be that grand either. It could be a small desire, just harmony in my family. That's simple. Or it could be an unwholesome desire. Any kind of an addiction is an unwholesome desire. I don't mean just drugs and alcohol. Because in a certain sense, we're all addicted. Addicted to fame, addicted to money to a certain degree, addicted to some kind of pleasure, sex, sleep, food, fame, and fortune. Those are the 5 desires. There's a way to determine whether something is an addiction or not. Does it lead to one way? I love this one teacher, Dr. Gabor Mate. Heard of him? Yeah, he talks about addiction a lot, and it's fantastic. He says something like, addiction is what gives us short-term relieves the pain that we're experiencing, but it has long-term bad consequences. Loss of relationships, loss of job, those kinds of things. But it makes sense in the short run, and that's why they're there. But they don't. It doesn't make sense in the long run. And yet sometimes we can't break ourselves out of that cycle. So to know, okay, well, there's actually wholesome desires too, and we can have those. Related to this, third one is the understanding that all of us have cravings, not just me. I'm not the only addicted one. Every one of us is. All of us are. We think, we tend to compare our insides with somebody else's outsides. And when that comparison is just deadly to our spirit. Because what somebody else is experiencing on the inside might be far worse than we could ever imagine. And yet on the outside it looks like they're totally okay, they're totally fine, they got everything they could possibly want, they got that great dream house, they've got the car, they've got the family, whatever it is that you see as desirable. Or maybe they have more independence, but we have no idea what's going on inside. So we can't just meditate in seclusion from the world. We also have to learn or find our place in our larger environment outside of the meditation hall. We need to learn to find our place in the outside world. And the question we can ask ourselves with this understanding that we all have cravings is, how much is enough? How much is enough? The Tao Te Ching says, he or she who embraces this Tao does not want to fill himself to overflowing. It is precisely because there is no overflowing that she is beyond wearing out and renewal. Okay, the fifth one is not looking outside ourselves for affirmation. You're okay. You're okay as you are. Just knowing that. You're totally okay as you are. The other aspect of this that I've found so helpful here is that we can develop the ability to listen closely to what's going on inside of us and use that as a means to guide us. So, I'm standing up here as a teacher because that's my job, but all of us are teachers. All of us are our own teachers. All of us have our own inner guides. I'm just kind of playing a role right now, and I have to listen to my own inner guide too. So to begin to cultivate the ability to listen to our intuitions, and what is that? What is our intuition telling us in any moment? And to trust that. And that's pretty radical. Not looking outside of ourselves for affirmation. Yeah, I'm not in control of you. I'm not in control of anybody. There's only this one I have to be in somewhat control of, to a certain degree. Find time. Number 6, find time for secluded contemplation. That's what we're doing right now. We're making time for ourselves. And trying to find, or I would say taste heaven in the here and the now. Find enjoyment in this practice of secluded meditation or contemplation. Find enjoyment. Make the practice enjoyable for you. Or if it's not, maybe look at how can I do this practice so it's fulfilling, that I really taste nirvana, I taste the wisdom of the Buddha, that I feel full. That's why Dogen says, Zazen is Anraku no Homon, the Dharma gate of joy and ease. So we want to be able to enjoy this time. The 7th one, making sincere efforts. So for this one, we might look back on our past experiences, looking back at the developmental stages, and as we move into the 4th stage of old age and coming closer to our death. And making sincere efforts in this context means that we need to discard our past accomplishments. We can't rest on them. We can't rest our laurels on what we've done in the past that we've succeeded at. We can't rely on them. And it might look like asking ourselves the question, can we do any part of a formal Zen retreat? Maybe we can't do the whole thing anymore. Maybe we can sit in our bed or lie down. We can practice meditation lying down if we can't sit up for whatever reason. Or maybe it means sitting in a chair rather than on the floor. We find the ways in there to continue our effort, make effort. Even with children. My life has changed drastically, some of yours as well, with children. I thought, I started out living in a Zen temple, and I did that from my child-rearing years until pretty much the end of my child-rearing years, and now I have a child at the end of that. And so I had the luxury of having access to a teacher all of the time, and retreats, 2-3 retreats a month, and daily sitting. That's not the case anymore. So making effort to me means I find it helpful to know that meditation takes place whether we're standing, sitting, walking, or lying down. So we have those 4 postures, and it's just a matter of reorienting our mind. So if we're with children, for example, with my son, sometimes I sit in the room with him. Don't you sit? Don't you sit down? It could be anywhere. It could be on the bus, but we sit down. It could be in your car. We take advantage of where we are. We don't have to find a special place or time. We just notice, where are we? And if we're walking, maybe we can notice the bottoms of our feet. It doesn't have to be at a slow pace. It could also be at a fast pace. If I'm holding my son, I chant the sutras. It's a wonderful practice. And that puts him to sleep sometimes. Not always, but most of the times. I'll chant the sutras right before his nap time. And so I used to do a formal ceremony every morning, for anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour-long ceremony. Now, if I do the sutras, I walk with him, and if he's really tired, he'll go to sleep before the end of 10 minutes. If he's not, then it might take a longer. So I have all those sutras in the back of my brain, and I just bring them out there, and because I've memorized them, I keep chanting them, and if he's not asleep after a certain one, okay, I got the next one, and then the next one. And usually he's out by the time I get to the last sutra in the ceremony that I usually do. He's done. He's done. I'm done and he's done. It's wonderful. So making sincere effort. Our practice sometimes has to change. The last one is cultivating wisdom. Seeing the world as always on fire, or as Grace Shearson says, in crisis. If as we age we crave fame and believe in shame, we add to our suffering. So if as we age we crave for making a name for ourselves and believe in shame that, actually I should feel shameful for my past conduct. If we believe that, we actually add to our suffering. We do that. We do that. But if we can notice it, maybe we can do it less. It doesn't mean we shouldn't still make effort, too. So inequalities, injustices have been around for a very, very long time. And so we need to take the long view here. So can we recognize that the world is always on fire? It always has been on fire. Our efforts matter. Our efforts matter even beyond this lifetime. Our efforts have an impact beyond this lifetime. So that's what it means to take the long view. Not attaching to the results of our actions in this lifetime. Not attaching to results of our actions in our lifetime. I'll just close with a quote from Grace. She says, "Demanding that our efforts result in visible accomplishments adds to our disappointment, despair, and suffering. Experiencing the human world as it is, rather than how we demand it to be, helps us continue our efforts with greater equanimity and less suffering." Okay, so I will close on that note. Thank you.